Hello, everybody. So excited to have you here with us today. And I'm excited for another fun guest. I have Danielle, sorry, not Daniel, Danielle Hendon from 4Corners CFO joining me today. Thank you so much for being willing to do this, Danielle.
Thank you for having me, Britta. I love getting to talk to other people about this kind of stuff.
It's so fun. Well, I love what we're going to talk about. So the theme for our month, right, is scary, like how to not make business things in business, the things we're doing, the things we have to do or don't want to do scary. So Danielle is owns a company that focuses on CFO services and helping businesses um, make the budgeting and a bunch of different things not scary. But today I think we'd like to focus on what can we do to make budgeting for your business not scary. So what are your tips for that, Danielle?
The first thing I always tell everybody is it's completely normal to feel like budgeting is scary. It is completely normal for so many business owners to just want to put their head in the sand and pretend the numbers don't exist. Sadly, that is not the best way to manage the numbers. But it's definitely, it can feel overwhelming. There's so many numbers in our business, and trying to think about not just knowing what those are, but then budgeting forward can feel very scary and very overwhelming. And I just want to normalize that before we even get into anything else.
I
You are
love that.
100% normal.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if you watched last week's, but the accountant I talked to last week said the same thing, like ostrich, syndrome, where you just want to hide and be afraid and not deal with it. So great analogy.
And it really is. I mean, it's out of sight, out of mind, right? We think if we're not looking at it that it's all going to go okay. And sometimes it does. For some business owners, you keep an eye on the bank account and you can, what's the analogy someone used the other day when I was talking to them? I think, oh, it was you're building the plane while you fly it. And that can work for a little while. But eventually we've got to start looking at where we're going. And I know for a lot of business owners that feel like the budget's scary, it's because you're looking back at all those numbers. That scary feeling comes from the overwhelm of all the numbers in the past and the potential anxiety of what the future might hold. The reason the budget is not the scary part of that is it's actually the solution to that anxiety. Any anxiety you have over what your future might hold in your business is actually solved in the budget. It's your roadmap. It's the game plan to get to where you want to go.
That's awesome. So, as a business owner going in and setting a budget, like what would you recommend? What are some strategies? How do you develop that? I know you work with people to do that, but can they do it on their own if they are not at the place yet to hire a CFO?
Everybody can set a budget. Just like you may or may not set a personal budget, you can set a business budget. Yes, it does mean you have to go back and look at what your numbers are. But you, as a business owner, most business owners are going to know what revenue is coming in the door because that's usually the cash that's in your bank account. And you keep pretty good tabs on that. So you know what's coming in the door. You know what you expect to bring in. You know what your regular clients bring in. If you have recurring clients, or if you're more transactional, you know what your average transaction is for that month. The part where a lot of people get overwhelmed is the expenses because we all just, I need to pay a bill. All right, here's my credit card.
Right.
And then figuring out what those expenses are and how to budget for them can feel a little bit overwhelming. So with my clients, I take them through a process where I actually do this for them, but you guys can totally do this. You want to break your expenses into 3 different categories. You're going to pull your expenses year to date. I know that's going to be a lot of numbers, but you want to know if it's something that comes monthly, quarterly, once a year, how often are you paying it? And that takes looking at your whole year. So pull all of your expenses and then you're going to break it into 3 buckets. The first bucket is going to be what I like to call required expenses. These are the things you absolutely have to run a business. For me, part of that involves licensing. Having my CPA license renewed is a big part of what I do in my business. If you're an attorney, it probably involves some licensing and some professional education as well. If you are a physical, like brick and mortar business, it's going to be, you've got to pay rent somewhere. Those are required expenses for your business. They may or may not be negotiable. When is the last time you kicked the tires to see if you could get a better rate on your cell phone bill or your email, if you're using Gmail or whoever for your email suite? When is the last time you kicked the tires on some of those required expenses to see if you can get them down? But also knowing what those are going to be the expenses that need to go in your budget going forward. If you're paying it once a month, it needs to be in the budget once a month. You know what you're paying. They usually don't change very often. A lot of our required expenses are usually what in the accounting world we call fixed costs. They're going to be the same thing every month. And then you have what I call personal perks, frivolous expenses, things we all know that we can run through our business and bring our taxes down and legitimately do so, but they don't necessarily add value to your business. Those you're going to want to identify and figure out if there's something you want to keep, because they're actually more of what I would call your owner's compensation. So when I work with my clients, if you have a lot of personal perks, we're going to add that to your owner's compensation number when we run some of our analysis, because it really is adding value to you as the owner, not necessarily to the business.
So are you thinking like stuff like the meals you like when you take clients out for meals, or like what's another example of something like that?
I have some clients that will run like their vehicles through their business, and that can be a bit of a personal perk, and they know it, but they know they can do it, so we do it. Other personal perks or frivolous expenses in general, we all know that we've subscribed to something along the way and forgot to unsubscribe to that really cool
So
subscription
many
box or
times.
whatever.
Right.
And those are easy. Part of this budgeting process is, do we really want to keep them? And if you do really want to keep them, then they go in the budget. But if you look at that and you go, oh, I forgot to cancel that, go cancel it and don't put it back in the budget. And then the very last category for all of my clients is what I call investments. So if it's not required, it's not a personal perk or a frivolous expense that we can cut. It is an investment in your business. And you really want to sit down and understand, what is this investment giving back to you in time or in money? And that can be tricky because there are things we pay for that give us back time and aren't always easy to quantify. But every investment should be looked at through the lens of, what does this add value to? What value does this add to my business? And I say all this because you want to you need to analyze those expenses before we put them in the budget. Because just like those frivolous expenses, if you have an investment that you're making and you're like, oh yeah, I pay this, we'll take marketing because that's the one that we all throw spaghetti at the wall so often and see what sticks, right?
Right,
I've been
right,
doing
exactly.
this marketing thing for a year, but you can't sit down and think of what it's given back to you. And I'm not saying it's always going to be easy to say, this marketing campaign gave me a client, so it's worth X. It may
What's your
not.
return on that investment, right? Like figuring that out.
Yes. And if it's not, if it's negative, and if you're like, oh, well, that's not even working, it needs to not be in the budget when you sit down and make your budget.
Yeah.
So that's the very first step, is figuring out what are your expenses. Then it's, how often do you pay them? Are they monthly? Are they quarterly? Are they annual? And then what I do with my clients is we literally just make the budget month by month. What do we want to have coming in this month? What are the expenses going out this month? And what's left at the end?
That's awesome. Simplified that process that can just seem, I love when people give me like a 3-step process, right? Like, oh, this is such a big, scary thing. I have to look at all my numbers for the whole year. But if it's like broken down into like simple, manageable steps, that's awesome. Well, such great tips. Do you have anything else you want to share? I know our time is getting short, so.
The one thing I always like to tell people whenever I'm talking about budget or numbers is to make sure that there is a number at the end of that. You want to have net income at the end of that so that you can start prioritizing your profit. I always tell people to set up a separate bank account, out of sight, out of mind, and put away 1% of your revenue into that bank account to create the habit of paying yourself and prioritizing your profit.
That's awesome. Such a great tip. Yeah. We I know a lot of people, a lot of clients and a lot of people that they can't pay themselves. And so that's the first thing that goes. So, but 1% seems like, oh, I can do that. So such a great
And
idea.
everybody can. It's all about building a habit and prioritizing yourself and trusting. As business owners, we have to be creative in so many different ways. And you can figure out how to pay the rest of your bills. If you've set aside that 1%, you will figure out how to pay the rest of your bills. But if you're paying the rest of your bills and then looking for that 1%, you may not find it.
That's awesome. Such great tips. So I know that you specialize working with lawyers, but you service all types of clientele. If anybody has questions, can they reach out to you?
Definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can visit my website, www.4cornerscfo.com.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much for your time, Danielle, and for the great tips. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Britta.
See you all next week, guys.